acknowledge Kimmy, who obviously holds a very important space here, because I've done 2 virtual meetings with you and your people, and I've also had emails from you where you've really got it going on. So, I do apologize. We had a plane that was delayed and stuff, so I'm sorry we're late. But I'm so grateful to be here. As you know, I've been a little busy. And you might have seen those memes. There's a lot of making fun of me out on the internet in the last couple days, some of which is so funny. I myself am falling on the floor laughing. And some of which is just a little bit well-deserved. But I just didn't know how to box that certain way. But in terms of the substance, I think we actually got some things out there. I saw one meme that said, East Coasters, who is this kook? West Coasters, oh, she's just like my doctor. Depending on whatever. Anyway, as you clearly know, I am running for president of the United States. I'm running for the Democratic nomination for the presidency. Say that. And I'm running with some really smart, good people. I don't feel like I'm running against anyone. I feel like I'm running with a lot of really great people. And you and voters in Iowa and voters in New Hampshire and voters in South Carolina clearly know it's all in your hands. And it's quite an experience and a real honor to be part of this. Californians now actually do have as much power because they start the early voting, but they don't seem to have really gotten it yet. So you don't have the same look on the face that you see in the other early primary states, that you know that something very, very, very big is going on here. And as Democrats, particularly, you have a dual consideration, probably more than at any other time, which is number one, who can and should carry America forward. To a certain extent, I think any of the people who are running can and should carry America forward. And there are some differences. And I will certainly talk about the things that I believe. But we have another issue as well, which is every bit as significant and somewhat different. And that is, how are we going to defeat Donald Trump in 2020? Right. I was reading just today about how the president is going to have a July 4th celebration on the Mall. And we've all been hearing about that. And I remember that he wanted, for his inauguration, he had wanted army tanks and so forth. And they had said to him at the time, the Army had said it would be too heavy on the streets of Washington, we can't do it. And I remember having a sigh of relief, at least he's not gonna get that. I don't know what changed, but I read today that there will be Army tanks on the Mall, on the National Mall. That is so repugnant. And I remember when we were kids, when I was a child, we used to see pictures in Red Square, how in the Soviet Union, the former Soviet Union, and they would have these military parades. I was always taught as a child, we don't do that here. We don't want to do that here because we are not a militarized society and we're happy about it. Now, he doesn't get that. But what really disturbed me about it, reading about that today, is you and I can look at that and just know it's awful. What worries me most about that man having a second term is that there are little children who, if he has 8 years, they will grow up not knowing how aberrant that is. That's dangerous. They won't know that that's not just what politics is. They won't know. So I don't have to go into any more of that. Here at Democratic headquarters, I don't need to tell you why we have such a big job on our hands. But I do want to tell you not only why I want to be president, but also why I hope you'll seriously consider me as the person who I think actually has the best chance of beating Donald Trump. Donald Trump is a phenomenon. Donald Trump is not just a politician. Donald Trump is bringing something that is unlike anything we've actually seen in American history. And we've been very fortunate not to have seen it in American history. That man has a lot of power. I mean, on one hand, he has the power of the presidency, which in terms of worldly events, you can't get more powerful. But he got there, and he will, if he remains there, do so by exercising a power of his personality, which is very clever and very shrewd, and which, when misapplied for unloving or nefarious purposes, as has been proven throughout history, and is proven in various places today, can be very, very dangerous. Now, he has harnessed something inside the psyche of people, and we've seen it. We've seen it in our friends, we've seen it in some elected officials, that really makes a lot of us shudder. He has a way with large groups of people. He has a way with motivating. Now, motivation can be positive or negative. Inspiration can only be positive. When Abraham Lincoln talked about the angels of our better nature, he actually did not think he was being metaphorical, because that was before the advent of modern psychology. So if you were talking to someone 150 years ago, and you were talking about something which today we would see as something like racism, bigotry, homophobia, anti-Semitism, xenophobia, people 150 years ago would have gone, oh, demons. And if you said to them, there's love and there's compassion, and there's kindness and there's tolerance, and there's goodness and there's love, people would have said, ah, angels. That's how they referred to those things. The field of psychology did not exist yet. So when Abraham Lincoln spoke of the angels of our better nature, he meant the aspects of our better character. Now, a nation is just like a person. None of us, maybe there are some enlightened masters in the room. I don't want to presume. My assumption is that we're all people. And we're proud of ourselves in certain ways, and in other ways, we know that we're not perfected yet. We have character defects. We have places in our personality or our character that we know come from our childhood wounds, blah, blah, blah. And part of healing is that we know even if we have those things, we can choose whether or not to act on them. And that's how a nation is. A nation, nobody ever thought, oh, there are no racists in America, there are no anti-Semites in America, there are no homophobes in America. Nobody thought those things didn't exist. But we had come to a point where we thought we had reached a consensus that there were levees on both left and right. And those aspects of us would not be given serious political expression ever again. We thought we reached that point. And then, oh my God, the levees have fallen, partly social media, and partly a human being who sought to harness those things for political purposes. Now, I don't think that the majority of Americans are haters. I think the vast majority of Americans are lovers. I think we are decent people. We are good people. I feel this to my core. I'm not saying I think we're better than other people, but I think we're decent people. However, what has happened in the last few decades, which turns out not to have been a good idea, is that the cultural trend has been in the direction of conversations about ethics, conversations about character, conversations about morality, conversations about goodness, conversations about love, conversations about all these wonderful aspects of character being circumscribed within the domain of the personal self. I don't think we ever stopped asking, what would be the good thing for me to do? I don't think we ever stopped caring about being good people. But somewhere along the line, we stopped asking about whether or not we're a good country. Somewhere along the line, we stopped asking issues of public morality. And I think a lot of us realize that that's what's happened. We became chronically disengaged from citizenship, really. Now, America has a mission statement. And that mission statement are the principles that are written in the Declaration of Independence. You know, tomorrow's July 2nd. It was actually signed on July 2nd, the Declaration of Independence, but then it was sent to the printer or something, and that's why it's July 4th. I don't know, I read all about it one day. And so July 4th, and John Adams, our second president, said that he hoped that forevermore that Americans would use July 4th to revisit our first principles. Now, I want to talk about those principles in the Declaration of Independence. Number one, all are created equal. Now, that sounds like a given today, but number one, it was radical at the time, and when you think about it, it's still radical. Because we're still talking about, if we had to start with, okay, that doesn't just mean black people, it doesn't just mean white people, it means black people, it doesn't just mean men, it means women, it doesn't just mean straight, it means gay. Now it doesn't just mean Americans, it also means people in other countries such as south of the border. I mean, there are so many issues in which that principle, we are challenged and tested regarding that principle even today. Secondly, that God gave, and it does say God gave all men inalienable rights of life and of liberty and of the pursuit of happiness. And then it says, governments are instituted among men to secure those rights. That's it. That's our mission statement. Now, what has happened to those principles? Well, in the Jewish religion, it says that every generation must rediscover God for itself. Now, what's happened to those principles is that they've been written on marble walls. And they have been inscribed on parchment and placed behind glass. And when our kids are 8 years old, we send them to Washington to see them. But those principles and the principles of our Bill of Rights are freedoms. That we have freedom of religion, we have freedom of protest, we have freedom of speech, we have freedom of assembly. Those principles, if they remain on marble walls or written in books somewhere, and we fail generation after generation to emotionally and psychologically rebond with them, emotionally and psychologically take them in, I'll tell you what happens. We become easy to play. We become easy to fool. We become easy to distract. Some of us just thought, oh, well, I'm not political, other people are taking care of it. You bet they took care of it, ladies and gentlemen. That's like saying, I'm going to leave my windows open, I'm going to leave my doors open, and naively think nobody's going to ever notice. And now we are where we are. And the only way things can be corrected is if you and I, something ignites inside us. And that is what the founder said, by the way. The founder said the only safe repository for power in this country is in the hands of the people. It wasn't just taken away. By our moving back and away from citizenship, which should be considered for all of us simply an aspect of living a meaningful, dignified, mature life, we acquiesced. We acquiesced. No, man, I can't say, probably Kimmy didn't. I mean, I know people who are very, very active politically, but, you know, a lot of us just sort of assumed things that perhaps we were a little naive to assume. Now, when Americans are awake, when Americans are alive, when Americans are totally on it about what freedom means, we can do anything. We can do anything. We have done great things. You know, when the founders wrote the Declaration of Independence, saying those amazing, aspirational, enlightened, illumined principles, the gnarly irony is that even though those principles are so amazing, 41 of them were slave owners. So that is baked into the cake here. That dichotomy has always been with us. It's the characterological polarity of the American mind. That on one hand, we are the country which at our core is founded on the most aspirational, the most enlightened, the most illumined principles, and from the very beginning have been at times the most violent transgressors against those principles. That has been true throughout our history, and the people and the forces that represent both sides of that coin have been with us in every generation, and ladies and gentlemen, they are with us today. Now, our narrative is that while there were the forces of slavery, a generation woke up and abolished slavery. Even though we had oppression of women, a generation rose up, and with two major waves of feminism and the women's suffragette movement. Even though we had segregation and institutionalized white supremacy in the American South, a generation rose up and dismantled segregation. Ladies and gentlemen, our generation has a challenge on our hands. And that challenge is not just Donald Trump. Because as I've made clear, and I think we would all agree, Donald Trump is in a way a symptom. Donald Trump, Louis Pasteur, I think he was French, unless he was Belgian, he was a French scientist, who his last words, I love this, talk about working till the minute you leave. His last words were, "I was wrong. It's not the germ, it's the environment." What if he sat up? Bonjour. Donald Trump emerged from an environment. And that environment has to do, in large part, as I said before, with something that too many of us, in too many ways, acquiesced to, made too many compromises with the ways we voted, the ways we didn't engage. And this has been going on for 40 years. And it's a mindset. It's not an evil institution like slavery or segregation, but it's a mindset that is heartless. And it began as an economic theory. But even those who originally, interestingly enough, even those who originally promulgated the economic theory were not of themselves heartless, because a man named Milton Friedman, who was the main designer of what I'm about to describe, he himself said, yeah, but we also have to have universal basic income or it won't be safe, which is fascinating. And that mindset is trickle-down economics. And trickle-down economics was the idea that all that a corporation should have to do is to worry about the profits on a short-term basis of its stockholders. And you should get government regulation out as much as possible so that they can do whatever they want. So then fiduciary responsibility to their stockholders would be at the expense of any moral or ethical responsibility to any other stakeholders, workers, community, environment, or whatever. Now let me ask you a question. What do you call one individual who has no morals, no ethics, no sense of conscience, or that they owe anything to anyone but themselves? What do you call that person?
Donald Trump. Sociopath.
Who said it?
Sociopath.
Sociopath. Mm-hmm. So if that's what one person is, what do you call an economic theory that feels no sense of moral or ethical responsibility to anyone other than its own short-term profits? If not a sociopathic economic theory. Mm-hmm. And that sociopathic economic system, while it began in the 1980s, what happened then in the 1990s was there was this explosion of the undue influence of money on our politics. So you had these just toxic brews. First, you had this economic system, and the promise was that all this money, you see, we're going to get all this money to these corporate stockholders, but it was going to be great, see, because all this money would trickle down and it would lift all boats. I think after 40 years, the jury's in. It has so not lifted all boats. It has left millions of people without a life vest. It has destroyed America's middle class. It has left 40% of all Americans living with chronic economic anxiety, not knowing what will happen if they get sick or if their kids get sick, not knowing how they're going to send their kids to college, not knowing how they're going to pay off their college loans. It has left millions of American people with their dreams capped, their circumstances unnecessarily constricted, and out of that trauma and out of that despair has come all manner of societal and personal dysfunction, including physical illness because of all that stress. And it has taken us to a situation where 1% owns more money than the bottom 90%. And the late Supreme Court Justice Louis Brandeis said that you can either have large amounts of money concentrated in the hands of a very few people, or you can have democracy. You cannot have both. Ladies and gentlemen, what has happened is that whereas in 1776 we repudiated aristocracy, We repudiated a situation in which only a few people got to be the winners. Only a few people got to own land. Only a few people got to own wealth. Only a few people got to actualize their dreams. We repudiated that and said that God put a spirit in everyone and everybody has the right. And here would be a place where we would uncap people's dreams. We would unleash people's spirits. People would have a chance to be who they want to be, do what they want to do. What has happened is that over the last 40 years, slowly at times and quickly at other times, depending which political party was in power, we have moved major resources of the public bank, of the public treasury into the hands of a very few people. To the point where our governmental policy routinely does more to enable those who already have money to make more money, and more difficult for those who do not have money to even thrive at all. We have, in terms of the paradigm that dominates our economy and our society, we have moved from a democracy to an aristocracy. We repudiated that in 1776, and it's time to repudiate it again.